Before we begin, a small heartfelt request: if you value deep, story-driven truth that connects faith, history, and the human soul, stay with this journey till the end and support this channel by subscribing. You are not just watching a story, you are entering a legacy that still shapes the world today. What the three heavenly books say about Abraham. The Torah introduces Abraham as the man who heard a divine call and walked away from everything familiar, becoming the father of nations through covenant and obedience. In Genesis, he is the one God chooses to establish an everlasting promise, not because of power or kingship, but because of faith. The Bible calls Abraham the man who believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. In the New Testament, he is remembered as the spiritual father of believers, the one who trusted God even when the promise seemed impossible. The Quran gives Abraham a title no other human shares: Khalilullah, the intimate friend of God. A man who rejected idols, challenged kings, broke false gods, and surrendered completely to divine will. The Quran does not present Abraham as a tribal hero, but as a universal model for all who seek truth. 3 books, 1 man, 1 legacy. The world Abraham was born into. Abraham did not enter a world searching for God. He entered a world drowning in certainty, false certainty. The land of Mesopotamia glittered with civilization. Cities rose from clay and ambition. Towers touched the sky. People believed they had already figured out the universe. Gods were manufactured, named, dressed, fed, and controlled. Faith was not about truth, it was about convenience. Abraham was born into a household that sculpted idols. His own father, a respected craftsman, shaped gods from stone and wood, then watched people bow before them. Imagine growing up surrounded by divine images, yet sensing that none of them could hear you. From childhood, Abraham noticed something unsettling. The gods never spoke, they never moved, they never defended themselves, and deep inside him, a quiet question began to grow, one that would shake civilizations. The first rebellion was not loud. Abraham did not begin with violence. He began with thought. He observed the stars, the moon, the sun, not to worship them, but to understand them. When they disappeared, he rejected them. Anything that rises and sets cannot be God. This was not astronomy. This was spiritual logic. While others inherited belief, Abraham interrogated it. He refused to accept tradition simply because it was old. He refused to accept authority simply because it was powerful. This alone made him dangerous. Because systems survive not by truth, but by unquestioned repetition. When faith turns against family, the most painful battles are never public. They are personal. Abraham questioned his own father. Not with insults, but with reason. Why worship something you create with your own hands? Why fear what cannot hear you? But truth threatens identity, and identity resists truth. His father did not see a seeker, he saw a rebel. A son challenging the foundation of society, economy, and religion. Abraham's questions were not just theological, they were revolutionary. Because if idols fall, power collapses. Breaking the gods was a message. The day Abraham shattered the idols was not an act of rage, it was an act of exposure. He destroyed them all except one. When the people returned in horror and demanded answers, Abraham pointed to the largest idol. Let it speak. Let it defend itself. Silence answered them. In that silence, something terrifying happened. For a brief moment, the people understood. Their gods were powerless. But truth is fragile when pride is involved. Instead of abandoning falsehood, they chose to punish the one who revealed it. Fire is a political solution. Truth has always frightened authority. The solution was simple: burn him. Not privately, not quietly, publicly. A spectacle, a warning to anyone else who dared to think. They built a fire so massive it became legend. Heat that could be felt from miles away. A punishment designed not just to kill Abraham, but to kill the idea he represented. And Abraham walked toward it alone. No army, no followers, no miracles promised, only certainty. The moment heaven intervened, as Abraham was thrown into the fire, the universe itself received a command. Fire, which was created to burn, was ordered to become cool. In that moment, Abraham did not escape danger. Danger surrendered. This was not rescue. This was validation. The message was unmistakable. When a human chooses God over everything else, creation itself rearranges. Abraham emerged untouched, not as a survivor, but as a sign. Why this story still matters. Abraham did not defeat an empire with weapons. He defeated it with conviction. He proved that truth does not need majority. That faith does not need inheritance. That God does not need representation. Every generation faces its own idols: power, wealth, ideology, ego. And every generation must decide whether it will bow or break. Abraham chose to stand, and history bent around him. Before we move forward into Abraham's confrontation with kings, migrations into the unknown, and the tests that would redefine obedience itself, pause here for a moment. If this story already resonates with something deep inside you, stay with us. Subscribe, support, and continue this journey, because what Abraham faces next will challenge not only belief, but the very meaning of surrender. Abraham did not leave the fire behind him. He carried it forward. Because surviving the flames did not end his trial, it began it. After the fire, Abraham could have stayed. He could have used his miracle as authority. People would have followed him out of fear. Power was finally within reach. But Abraham was not chosen to rule cities. He was chosen to walk away from them. God did not tell him where to go, only told him to go. This is the first migration in sacred history not driven by famine or war, but by trust. Abraham packed his life into uncertainty. Family, homeland, language, protection, all left behind for a promise with no visible proof. This is where most people fail faith. They believe as long as the path is clear. Abraham believed when the path disappeared. He walked into deserts that did not know his name, valleys that had never heard revelation, nights where the stars were the only witnesses to his prayers. And yet, every step away from comfort brought him closer to destiny. When Abraham reached new lands, kings noticed him, not because he demanded attention, but because certainty has a weight that power can feel. One of those kings was Nimrod. Nimrod did not fear Abraham's God. He feared Abraham's independence. A man who bows to nothing on earth is uncontrollable. And kings cannot rule what they cannot intimidate. So Nimrod challenged him, not with swords, with philosophy. Who gives life? Who controls death? Abraham answered simply, God gives life and death. Nimrod tried to imitate divinity by sparing one prisoner and killing another. He thought he had matched God with illusion. Abraham did not argue further. He shifted the question. God brings the sun from the east. Bring it from the west. Silence returned. Power collapses when exposed to truth. And Nimrod, like all tyrants, responded not with reflection but rejection. Abraham walked away again. This is important. He did not stay to win debates. He stayed only long enough to plant truth. Because truth does not need applause. It only needs survival. Years passed. Abraham aged. His hair turned white. His body weakened. And still no child. The promise echoed louder with every unanswered prayer. A nation would come from him. A legacy would flow through him. Yet his house remained silent. This was not cruelty. This was preparation. Because a promise delayed is a promise tested. Many believe when blessings arrive. Abraham believed when they did not. When the child finally came, he was not just a son, he was proof. Proof that God's timing is not human timing. Proof that hope is not foolish if it is anchored in the unseen. Isaac's birth was laughter after decades of waiting. A miracle wrapped in flesh. And then came the command that shattered logic. Sacrifice him, not metaphorically, not symbolically. Sacrifice the very miracle you waited a lifetime to hold. This is the moment that defines Abraham forever. Because God was not asking for Isaac. He was asking for Abraham's heart. Would Abraham love the gift more than the giver? The journey to the place of sacrifice was silent. No speeches, no tears recorded, only steps forward. Isaac asked a question that still echoes through history. Where is the offering? Abraham answered with words that reveal the core of faith. God will provide. He did not say, I hope. He said, He will. At the final moment, when obedience reached its absolute edge, heaven intervened again. The knife stopped. A ram appeared, and God declared something no other human had been declared. Abraham had passed, not because he was perfect but because he withheld nothing. This is why Abraham is called the friend of God. Friendship with God is not about comfort. It is about trust without negotiation. From Abraham came prophets, nations, scriptures, revolutions of belief. Judaism traces lineage to him. Christianity traces faith to him. Islam traces submission to him. 3 religions, 1 source. Abraham did not build empires. He built a direction. And every soul that searches for truth walks in his shadow whether they know it or not. What remains now is the final lesson. The legacy. And why Abraham still speaks to a world drowning in idols of a different kind. Stay with this journey. Do not leave before the end. If this story is reshaping how you see faith, support this mission by subscribing because we'll not just complete Abraham's story, it will confront ours. Abraham did not live long enough to see nations rise. He lived long enough to plant something far more dangerous. An idea. After the trial of sacrifice, Abraham's life did not suddenly become easy. Friendship with God was never a reward system. It was a responsibility. He continued to move, continued to build, continued to call people not to himself, but to truth. Wherever he went, he rebuilt something that had been broken since the dawn of humanity: direct connection with the Creator, without intermediaries, idols, or inherited lies. Abraham taught that faith is not location-based. It is intention-based. He prayed under open skies. Built altars not to house God, but to remember Him. His worship was not theatrical. It was quiet, consistent, and absolute. This is why his legacy survived. Because empires collapse when leaders die. But ideas live when they are rooted in truth. God established a covenant with Abraham not because Abraham demanded it, but because Abraham was ready to carry it. A covenant that was not limited to bloodlines alone, but to belief, surrender, and moral courage. Abraham was told that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. But more importantly, he was told that through him, guidance would spread to humanity. This matters, because Abraham was not chosen to be exclusive. He was chosen to be foundational. When Abraham passed away, there were no palaces, no crowns, no armies marching in tribute. What he left behind was far more powerful a path. Generations later, prophets would rise from his lineage, each carrying the same core message, adapted to different times, but anchored in the same truth. Moses would confront tyranny. David would redefine kingship. Jesus would revive the heart of faith. Muhammad would restore submission to one God. Different eras, same root. Abraham. This is why Abraham exists in all three revelations, not as a side character, but as a central pillar. Because his struggle represents the eternal struggle of humanity, truth versus comfort. Abraham chose truth every time. He chose truth over family approval, truth over social acceptance, truth over safety, truth over logic, truth over even the miracles he was given. And this is where Abraham stops being history and becomes a mirror. Because modern idols are not carved from stone. They are carved from ambition, ego, nationalism, technology, ideology, and self-worship. People no longer bow physically. They surrender mentally. Abraham's story asks an uncomfortable question: what would you walk away from if truth demanded it? Your career, your tribe, your beliefs inherited without question, your comfort. Most people admire Abraham because they never expect to be tested like him. But history shows something unsettling. Every generation is tested. Only the form changes. Abraham's fire was physical. Ours is psychological. His idols were visible. Ours are normalized. Yet the requirement remains the same. Surrender without conditions. This is why Abraham is called the friend of God, not because God needs friends, but because Abraham trusted God when trust was unreasonable. Friendship implies choice. And Abraham chose God again and again. As this story ends, remember this clearly. Abraham was not chosen because he was extraordinary. He became extraordinary because he chose. And that choice is still available. If this journey through Abraham's life awakened something within you, a question, a discomfort, a pull toward deeper truth, then stay connected. Support this channel, subscribe, and continue walking this path with us. Because the stories of the chosen are not meant to entertain. They are meant to transform.